When the Washington Senators started its franchise, they needed a place to train. In a small, rural Florida city, they found a facility. Tinker Field. It was the home to the Senators' March sessions.
Hello, Mr. Griffith, Mrs. Griffith, Calvin, how are you? Nice to see you down here, and certainly this is not new to you. You've been sitting in these Orlando stands since about 1936.
That's
And actually, Mr. Griffith, didn't you bring one of the first clubs to Florida?
Yes, I did, Art. I was one of the first two that ever came down here to make it a custom.
The ballpark would be passed on to the Minnesota Twins when the franchise moved in 1961. And it would become home to some of the most celebrated names in the team's history, with Calvin Griffith serving as its owner. These were the temporary offices for the Minnesota Twins front office. And yes, this is where Calvin Griffith would go every day and start his day. Just a short walk up to the owner's suite where he could watch his favorite team play a spring training game or practice. Today, it stands a skeleton. The ambiance of Major League Baseball, years removed from it, but just enough left to make you remember what was. When this served as a serviceable home, maybe lacking some of the modern amenities.
Well, Tinker Field, compared to present facilities, was about as worse a field as it could be. It was a nothing spring training. Probably in those days, with Calvin not spending any money, it was probably the worst spring training facility of all the major league teams then.
Actually, this was seen as state-of-the-art at one time for the Senators, and Calvin Griffith was a young apprentice.
Well, of course, they've always called you the old fox, and you spoke of spending money a moment ago. And the young fox here, Calvin, the executive vice president of the ball club, has been spending the money this year because he's signed the contracts. Calvin, did you have much trouble?
Well, Arch, we did have a little trouble, but being under Uncle, great leadership has been mighty easy for me.
You learned how to trade in good company, didn't you?
He's a pretty good trader, brother, I'll tell you that.
Can you imagine being a rookie in spring training and you look out here and here's Nolan Ryan standing? It used to happen. Yes, this is where they came, players trying to prove themselves. They journeyed to a small, quaint ballpark. This was maybe more important to host their minor league team in the Summer Southern League, making it a real ground for development. So the people would come from up north and they'd get away from winter for a while and they'd get a box seat and they could get close to the players and to the field and they'd watch their favorite sport, baseball. Actually, they did not exactly flock to the old ballpark in those days. It was not yet part of the spring break packages and the annual pilgrimages we see today.
They played Winter Haven a lot, and that was a little nicer because it was newer and Lakeland, but this was the way spring training was. And, you know, they draw 250 people unless either the Red Sox, the Yankees, or the Dodgers played there.
It's not quite the same as back in the day when you might want to take one away from Ted Williams going down the left field line. The paint is starting to crack, but the kids, they used to sit on the other side of the wall, hoping to land a home run ball on that day.
Spring training in the 70s, into the 80s, was nothing, and the main reason nobody flew down because the airlines weren't deregulated yet, so you couldn't fly anywhere cheap, and nobody came to. I mean, when some guy showed up from Minneapolis, a fan, it was a big deal in 1970. Hey, there's Bill. Hey, he's back this year. You know, he drove down.
The Citrus Bowl is another landmark down here. They play some football games in there. It's adjacent to Tinker Field and has been here for quite some time. During the 1960s and 70s, there was another company in Orlando that was just starting to come into its own, and people were starting to come down here just for it and to go to a ball game. Small company by the name of Disney. Yes, when Mickey's last name became synonymous with mouse and not mantle, you actually ended up with a bigger draw. The tourists began to show up, and in March, it became a bit of a destination.
It didn't take off right away, but eventually it really took off.
But before all that, you had this, the original intention of spring training, to groom your current team and teach the prospects the proper way.
Well, here you see Pete Appleton demonstrating how to wheel and make the pickoff play at second base. Now let's see how these youngsters pick this thing up.
Walk on the field today, and you cannot help but feel a sense of surreal history. when players came here with an optimistic outlook for the season and their careers.
Interest in spring baseball has never been higher. Fans from all over the country line up here at Tinker Field 2 hours before game time to get general admission tickets.
Everybody's excited, and we're just glad to be here, and hopefully we can bring the championship back to Minnesota where it's supposed to be.
Looking very optimistic. We're going to go out and get ourselves prepared for a good campaign.
Have to be, optimistic. It's the only way to pretty much look at anything.
Everybody's attitude first day of spring training was completely different from years past, and that's a big plus.
What has never changed is that these March playgrounds are where you come to believe that your team is the team. And Tinker Field was just that.
You could be a lot younger this year if what we hear is true about this ball club.
Yes, I could, and I certainly hope it develops to Chuck's satisfaction and mine. We've got a lot of fine young ball players. We've been spending a lot of money in 3-4 years and trying to develop them in classes A, B, C, and D, and so forth.
The Minnesota Twins made the move to Fort Myers and added an entire complex to help accommodate what they needed to get done in the spring, a bit different than back in the day. Across the street, they had a place where you could either take infield or they could send minor leaguers to take a look. Yet this was their definition of a spring training major league complex. Not exactly a place to develop your rosters, but no one knew any different.
They called it Iwo Jima because the infield was so bad. They get hit in the throat with balls, and that was it.
Think of how many stories can be told, how many dreams were shattered, how many became reality. That's what you feel when you spend time here. You are reminded of memories. It is that romance that is a prominent part of baseball. Remembering when, understanding what once was is no more, but it will live forever. For many, these are treasured images. For others, well, Tinker Field will never stand out as that special bastion of baseball glory.
Nothing good about Tinker Field that I could say.
Life to the Max is brought to you by Life Touch, photography for a lifetime.